always fostering change in the industries that I've been involved in. Please excuse me. It always happens at the wrong time. I'm sorry about that. I've been involved in various industries: investment management, real estate, marketing and communications, as well as now more predominantly with the market theatre. I'm involved in the arts and culture sector. I've had the privilege of presenting myself to the Portfolio Committee of Arts, which, because of my obligations within the market theatre, I've had to do. When it comes to any disclosures, I don't have any conflicts of interest within the industry which I'm presenting myself now. I have none. I do not foresee any going forward. And I'm an outsider to broadcasting specifically, but I'm an insider when it comes to the media in general, because the arts and culture sector acts within the realm of that. And I've also had broadcasting experience within radio stations where I've been a feature in some commentary on economics and other things that are related. If you ask me what is my view of the SABC as an outsider to the organization, I've never served on it. I don't interact with it. I have been to the SABC recently. I must say, when I went to Radio Park in Auckland Park, I was impressed with their artwork collection. I don't think a lot of people notice that. It's of high level, high value, and it just hangs on the wall. You'd be surprised at the values that are attached to that, which is a good thing, by the way. What's important for me is to present myself and just speak candidly about my thoughts and what I see within the SABC. I think first and foremost, I'm a father of 3 as well. As I've said that, I believe in fathers' rights. I've had a journey in that regard. And the SABC, where it is now, it's an asset that has had a hemorrhage. It's been hammered by this House, being Parliament and Portfolio Committee, for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong reasons, and I'll get to that. And also, it's an asset that came out of an unfortunate situation, which is apartheid and a mouthpiece for government of the time. And it's an asset that's not been turned around to serve society in its current form, as it should be and ought to be. And I will touch on that. Now, in looking at it, as an entrepreneur, I change things, I improve things. Now, I looked at the SABC and I developed 5 Ps and 1A. And the 5 Ps are really in short summary, because I've got limited time.
Let's do this, because your 3 minutes is, is gone.
I should stop, okay.
I think other issues that you wanted to raise will fit in when members ask questions. I didn't hear where you come from.
Oh, as in I'm born. Okay. I'm born in Durban, ngazalelwa eMlazi. Yes, and I've lived my life throughout the country, and I predominantly do work in Johannesburg, and I keep a home there, and I still keep a home in KwaZulu-Natal. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumbi. Members, Honorable Tseti, can you start?
Mr. Gumbi, let me tell you up front, we have 5 minutes to interact. So I'm raising this thing because I will appreciate if you can be very brief and straight to the point so that we are able to do justice. I have about 17 questions for you, but I'll try and see if I can trim them down to about 3 or so, if possible. There's only one chairperson. Mr. Gumbi, more often when we talk about the SABC, people always think about the television version of the SABC. If appointed a board member, what is it that you can do to change people's mindset that there's this other version, the radio version, and why do you think it's important?
Thank you for that question, Honorable Member. The SABC, you're right, it's got television, it's got radio. Radio, from the literature of the SABC, and rightly so, it's got about 16 radio stations, and that reach is quite high. And as you would know how our population sparsity dispensation in this country is organized. Some of our members of society still receive their information through radio. So the SABC's role in continuing to invest in its radio system is quite important, that it continues to be a form of information, as its mandate says, education, as also to entertain. So we've got people in urban and rural setups, especially now when we have traffic. Like I was driving from the airport. All we were listening to was radio. We spent an hour on radio. So the radio importance of the SABC cannot be overemphasized, as well as the content that impacts it.
What's your view on the debate which says the powers and the role of the executive directors in the board need to be reviewed? And why do you think it's a good idea to do that? Okay.
I think it's a good thing to continuously review the delegation of authority and the power that is attached to that. It's an ongoing thing. It's part of organizational renewal. That's number one. First of all, you review it if there are errors and mistakes that are done, which means the organization suffers losses or there is a misinterpretation of what the strategy and its imperatives are. That's number one. Number two, I would then also caution on changing something for the sake of change if it is not broken. You know that saying that if it's not broken, don't fix it. There are elements within the SABC, having seen what the public commentary about it is, I think there has to be some form of a review, but that review must not be informed only by what has occurred. It must also be informed what the SABC can be in future.
I'm sure you know that the SABC is just one entity that reports to the Minister of Communications. If you were to be appointed Minister of Communications, first meeting with the SABC Board, what are the two key things that you think you will tell the SABC Board to focus on? Two critical things. Minister of Communications, Mr. Gumbi.
As Minister of Communications, if I were to be appointed to that post, the first thing I will do, I will remind the board of its role, because it's got a legislative acts that it has to work within in terms of boundaries, remind it of its role, and secondly, then remind them of the business model of the SABC, which is quite important. And that does not mean I'll remain an engaged minister as a representative of the shareholder, but not an interfering shareholder.
Let's conclude. The relationship between the SABC and the regulator, ICASA.
Yeah.
What's your take? Is it a good relationship? How best can we improve on that relationship if it's not in a good state of affairs?
I'm not too familiar with the extent of the relationship itself, but I can say this, because of the legislative relationship that is established by the two acts that exist between the two parties, I think continuous engagement is important. And I also think where there needs to be mechanisms where there is a failure in understanding each other's roles, where you can resolve it outside what needs to be done as a normal course of business. And those resolution points must be such that they are fast and they have the right members that fulfill those mandates or are part of those committees to resolve and iron out differences. It's important that they continue to work effectively because both institutions have got a mandate to fulfill.
Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Kungubela.
Sakubona Baba Gumbi.
Siyaphila Baba kunjani?
Yes, philile imilo.
Honorable member. Yes.
Like him, I've got 5 minutes with you.
Sure.
If you look at the SABC as we speak, what would you say are 3 priority challenges?
Okay. First priority is that the SABC is an institution that's been battered on all fronts. The staff morale is low. I think that's number one. And you need people to make that place turn around. That's first. I don't think it starts only at board. It starts from the ground up. The board leads it. Two, I think the Ministry of Communications still has a lot to learn and change itself in how it relates to the SABC. We've had enough evidence to show that people have not acted in the best interest of that entity. So there's that second part, which is the shareholder representative. I think the third element that's important, it would be this oversight of this parliament, where you have early warning signs if something goes wrong and ask the right questions so that you can then test the board into those issues to resolve. So those are the three areas I will touch on.
If I were to say, start today, what would be the first two areas of immediate focus, and what would you do?
Two areas, I'll go to people. I set the new culture. That's what's very important. And I will also, in setting the new culture, I'll have to remind the people that work for the SABC that for the first time, somebody has to defend them. What I will do, I'll create what is called the territorial integrity of the organization. There are issues of public interest and everything that relates to the mandate, but not of the organization. The organization cannot be, in the way it operates, that it can be attacked in the way that it does. It needs to be protected so that people, at least as professionals, they're able to do their job. That's number one. Number two, what is most important, I will invest in the businesses within the SABC that work. I'll start there, because there are assets within the SABC. Take, for instance, the outside broadcast unit. It does very well. Some of the commercial radio stations, they do very well. I will invest in those in order to buy ourselves out of trouble.
There's a chart,
yeah,
board charter, which is prescribed by the Broadcasting Act. In the charter, there's a section, the role of the board. It's got a series of governance imperatives, corporate governance imperatives. If you can name 2, 3 or more, 3 is okay.
Sure. I read the charter. It's okay. It can be improved, I must say, just given that one's had experience. Yeah, it can be improved. I think it shows that there's an element of state in it. Governance has got is a framework at which to make things go right, and then you've got what is called practice notes to improve things as they emanate, because you are there to guard against bad behavior and promote good behavior. The first thing that I would promote is that the separation of powers continues to be in such a manner that it is robust. It has tension. When I say tension, I mean healthy tension between the executive of the SABC and the board, and between CEO, COO, financial officer. There has to be that healthy tension where each individual that occupies such positions does so within their own right, and there's a level and degree of accountability. That's number one. Number two, the board charter, there's a lot that has happened from the deterioration of the SABC, which can now be built into the new charter, which could be formulated to say, with that charter being in place, there were things that could go wrong. For instance, you find that board members could be involved in some negotiations that can either put the organization at risk to incur losses or even incur a profit, which shouldn't happen in that way. But through a practice note under the governance, within the charter, under governance, you can then say, what is the role of the board in the event, for instance, you've got an acting CEO, the CEO that was there is out. What is the response of a board when the shareholder is interfering? You've got practice notes on those things, because this is all these things that we've seen. And a charter, when it's formulated today to work into perpetuity, it will not take some of these incidences into consideration in future. If I use the terminology of government, you'll use government directives in order to improve the charter.
Thank you. Your 5 minutes is gone.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
Honorable Van Dam.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I just have questions around your qualifications. I'm just asking so that we have clarity. I don't want to misinterpret what's in front of me. Do you have a degree?
I've got a postgrad in business management, and my degree is incomplete. I did, prior to that, a management advancement program.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I see you've done a lot of certificate courses.
Sure.
Why didn't you finish your degree?
There's a reason that I didn't finish my degree, which I listed there. When I did my degree,
yes.
it was financial reasons. And by that time, I had to work, and then I just moved forward.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for letting me know. Do you have one creative idea about how to improve the SABC's finances?
Yeah. The first thing is, I think the SABC can use a lot of innovation. The buzzword right now within the space the SABC works on is called content. There are a lot of ways the SABC can use content. In fact, it can get hold of free content and commoditize it and sell it. And I think that is one area that the SABC can do. Secondly, it can do that within newer players in the industry, younger people, because younger people are working with content all the time. And they're also always looking for space to which to express themselves. And I think those smaller collaborators with the SABC's big infrastructure, which it can leverage with younger people who are drivers of content and also consumers of content, I think that's one key area the SABC can push itself forward and ahead.
So your idea is for the SABC to find content that it doesn't have to pay for and then turn that into profit?
Yes, that is what I'm saying. There is content that is free. There is content you can commoditize. There is content that you don't have to
Where would
invest.
they find this free content?
Collaboration through young people. Young people know what they want. For instance, there is the space of, in businesses, there are startups, there are people who want to market their businesses that do not have the budgets to use the SABC. They are creating ways at how they can then use the internet and social media to then advance their businesses. With the SABC having the same infrastructure of airtime and otherwise, it can work with those young people, especially in the media space, in trying to create opportunities, which the SABC, with its size, is not able to capitalize on them.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a strange suggestion. I mean,
Sure.
Everyone must be paid for, performers also need to be paid for the services that they deliver. So I think it's a bit dicey.
No, we're talking two different things. Performance is something else. We're talking content where somebody collaborates with you and say, I share this content and you bring to me the spectrum or your airtime, for instance. That's the collaboration I'm talking about.
So exposure, they must be paid in exposure.
There's a trade-off. There's a trade-off.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. What do you think of the SABC's current editorial policy?
Yeah, I've seen it. Again, it's an evolving document. I think it can be improved, especially when the integrity issues with some of the content, the SABC, and how it policies its work. And I think there's a lot that can be done. I believe from the art sector, we have coined very well artistic freedom that is enshrined. And I think the SABC can also, in a way that it can learn from the arts, is to try and have its own independence. But within that, you still have to get the right people first in order to clean out that editorial policy. As it looks now in the complaints that have been mentioned, there's a lot that still can be improved.
What specifically about the editorial policy would you change? If you point me to a specific section or idea that's in the policy that needs to be changed.
I think I will not speak in terms of the policy in the exactness in terms of what it is, but I'll speak to it in this way. For instance, in the area of news, the news have to be fair, they must report what they see, and they must have integrity. There's no doubt about that. Some of the decisions that you would have heard, how the news have been manipulated to fashion an outcome, that's not acceptable. That does not give confidence to what the SABC stands for. Such interference from people who are custodians within, having been given the delegated authority to execute that, I think that is what is wrong. We need to place the right people in the right position to do the right thing. And I think the SABC needs that, and hence I've been mentioning a lot about people. I think whatever we try and intend doing, if we don't have the right people in the right place to do the right thing, we're going to keep running around in circles.
Thank you. Honorable Jose.
Thank you. You said when you started, excuse me, Chairperson, am I fine? Yeah. You said when you started that you have 3 kids and you believe in fathers' rights. What was the relevance of that?
Am I back on? It was when the chairperson started, says, I should tell you about myself and then about why I'm the right candidate. So I was just talking from that point.
Yeah, but I mean, I want to know, what do you want me to do with that information? Because you said I have 3 kids, and by the way, I believe in fathers' rights.
I think the opportunity to present.
Let me remind you quickly. Okay. You were explaining the importance of SABC towards education.
Okay.
And then you said, by the way, I have 3 kids and I believe in fathers' rights. I want to understand that comment properly.
Okay. It comes from this way. From the Honorable Chair, when I was presenting myself, it's something that I wanted to mention so that it gives the Portfolio Committee the opportunity to see the person that is before them and get to see what drives them.
So you are not married, but you are taking care of your kids?
I actually have been married.
Okay. Well, I don't know why you were talking about fathers' rights. That's fine. Okay. Artists, it seems to me from the CV, there is an important uniqueness here, which is you seem to have placed a lot of emphasis on the creative arts industry. That maybe is the contribution you are bringing to the board. Tell us a bit more about your work there, if I am correct.
Okay. Based on my CV, I was just trying to bring in the various experiences that I've had, and more so specifically that can relate to the SABC. The work I've done there, I think first and foremost, is to ensure that artistic freedom are respected. From a board chair in the organization that I lead, I do not interfere with artistic decisions. And I'm comfortable with that, and my board is comfortable with that. But we get the right people to then work on the artistic component of our work in a manner that we don't second guess them. Whatever they decide to put on our stages through photo workshops and all other things that are artistic, because we've gotten the right person, the delegation is full and meaningful.
So what are the struggles of artists in relation to the SABC that you think must be the immediate attention of the board, even if you're not in it?
Sure. I think there are 2 top of mind. One doesn't relate exactly to the SABC, but the first one is that their content is not consumed enough by the SABC. That's the first thing, and it's a valid one. Number 2, it's slightly an outside issue to the SABC, but still relevant, is that as a result of the little that is played or consumed, then their royalties do not come through. I know it's a SAMRO issue, that one, but still there's a relatedness to it.
So how would you improve this? You are in the board. What do you do to get more content to be played? Because the big problem with content, I'm told, is the 90% rule, which many people are discarding now. They're saying it destroyed the finances of the SABC. So let me pose my question in this way.
Sure.
Yeah. Wouldn't that lead to the same drama that is claimed in relation to 90% rule, which destroyed the finances of the SABC? What's your attitude towards that?
My attitude is very clear. You need to consume your country's art. There's no doubt about that. But you've got to, in a country like ours, where we've not predominantly done that the right way, you need to phase that in. There is a process at which you go through. As you go through it, you will have a balance of artistic consumption, the finances that support it, and you would know when you push a little bit more, then the laws of diminishing returns starts kicking in, or vice versa, you have to pull back. It cannot be an overnight decision when you say, this is what I'm doing.
Okay, so the final question is, if that is the case, isn't it true that attracting investments in the SABC through corroborations of audiences is a contradiction? Because I don't know whether your work has audience or not. I eat from audiences. I mean, surely I give you platform because your work gives me audiences. So isn't that a contradiction? Because earlier on you were talking about solving financial crisis through collaborating with free products. But the point is audiences.
Sure.
And if something that is put on the platform reduces audiences, then I don't get funding. So how do you resolve that?
Okay, first of all, collaboration is not a swear word. It's in fact the new way of doing business, the new way of the business model.
Be direct, brother. We don't have time.
Yeah.
When people put local content, the claim is audiences go down. So it is a risk to take, in particular, products that are free. For instance, a drama or a particular show, which somewhere people say, we'll give you this content for free to play on SABC at this time. All we want is a platform. A person who runs the SABC will say, but it will take the numbers down, and as a result, I may not get advertisement. How would you resolve, or what will be your attitude to that?
First, I don't come from that point of view.
Keep that question in mind,
Yes.
because your time is up. Just keep that question in mind. Honorable Madisha.
Let me just record
And then you
that.
can slot it in when you have a space.
Let me clarify, sir, that the main objective of this interview is to improve the SABC. Okay. Now, the first question I put to you is a point that you have put, your statement that you put here today. You said, or quote unquote, the shareholder is interfering and that contributes to the collapse of SABC. That is what you said, okay? I want you to explain so that we then, on the basis of that, can be able to handle that. And secondly, in your CV, there is a paragraph where, no, about 3 lines, where you say, quote unquote again, you have been, or rather you are active in media and communications, arts and culture, primary healthcare, commercial, real estate, trade and investments. Okay. Now, what I wish to know is, how does that, help us in this instance? Remember, you, I believe, now understand precisely that which we want, insofar as the board is concerned. And I will put it to you that some of those particular areas are not that which we say should take us forward as the people who've got to put forward the board of SABC. Would you want to explain that?
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me start quickly with the last question, local content. They say it drops audiences. I don't come from that set of belief. There's a lot of local content, if we just migrate a little bit to go to Mzansi Magic, for instance, where it's driven by local content, and the numbers that you are seeing there are quite high. When you program right, local content can be consumed. You cannot just throw anything that is not good enough and expect audiences to grow. Secondly, local content needs to be developed. Audience development is a science of its own. You need to develop audiences. You can't just expect one day then everything is worked out. You develop audiences over time to appreciate the things that are around them as well as the things that are foreign and outside. Coming back to the 2 questions that were raised by the Honourable Madisha. First one is that the shareholder is interfering. That's correct. Those are my words. This is based on the public information that is available to us, including the extensive work that was done by the ad hoc committee and how the questions and the conversations related to that. I'm in support of a shareholder that is engaged. Engagement means you talk to those who you've delegated authority to. In this case, it will be the board. You need to set priorities. You need to set what you need. And there's nothing wrong with that because clear guidelines and reporting channels are quite clear. Here, you've got a shareholder that seems to fashion out an outcome where it's not based on a strategy, it's based on the issues of expediency end of the day. And I think that needs to change, and Parliament is helpful in working that out. It's not so much the issue of the board, but the board can be tested in that in terms of performance. The issue on my CV and the industries that I've touched on, you're asking me how can I help the SABC move forward? Mind you, this is a position for the board. It's not an executive position. The board at best meets 4 or 5 times a year. In this case, the SABC is in quite a bad state, so they might necessitate that we meet more often. But still, there's no operational levers. So what do I need to do as a board member? First and foremost is to help the organization set the tone, which means in setting the tone is the strategy direction in which the organization should go. And that strategy direction for me is the business model of the SABC. I know what has happened. It's quite good that we know it and we have to make sure that things do not happen. But the model is the following. The things that the SABC does well, we need to isolate them and know what they are. We need to reinvest in them. The items that within the SABC that have not gone right based on past behavior, we need to know why they have not gone right. Some of the businesses may not need to exist in the form that they currently do. We need to consolidate them to other units, or alternatively, give them a caretaker status where we give them more support so that they can then stand on their own.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Honorable Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gumbi, thank you very much for making yourself available to us. I just would like to know on a point of clarity, you've got a postgraduate diploma, but you don't have a degree, so you didn't graduate. How did you get a postgraduate degree without a graduate degree?
There is a program that was run by the University of Natal. It recognized prior learning. It was in the early 2000s, and it took you from management, prior learning, management advancement program. It's well established. It's well known.
Recognition of prior learning?
Yeah, prior learning experience, you go through that program, and in fact, you could finish even an MBA. Yeah, it's well established. You can check it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It was reported in the press a few years ago that you are you were a close business associate of Sifiso Zulu.
He was a friend of mine, yes.
Who was a confidant of President Zuma. Can you please tell us what the nature of your business relationship was with Mr. Zulu?
He was a friend of mine. He's late now. He was a friend of mine, and I spoke at his funeral when I made those remarks. It was last year, and his unveiling is coming up next month, in September.
Okay. Have you ever had any business links with the president or anybody associated with the president?
No.
Thank you. The removal of Ronnie Lubisi, Rachel Kaladas, and Hope Zinde 2 years ago, do you think it was unlawful? They were SABC board members. Do you think it was unlawful? And if so, why do you think it was unlawful?
I picked up, the honourable member, I picked up the headlines. I'm not sure of the legality of it, whether it was lawful or not. But what I do know is that board members can be removed following due process, and I also know that board members can resign. As to the exact nature, there was a lot of conflicting reports. I didn't quite get to the nub of it as to what actually it was. But in any event, you cannot remove board members unlawfully. That's number one. Number two, board members have got the right to stand up and be a board member, and also have a right to say whatever the culture is, and if they don't agree to it, they can resign. So I'm not too sure the exact nature of that matter.
Okay. My final question is, when the Public Protector's report came out on the SABC, which detailed the irregularities around Claudi Motsoeneng's appointment, the inflation of his salary, and lots of other findings that were contained in that report, one of the recommendations was that the SABC board remove him, or at least conduct a disciplinary inquiry into the allegations. The Minister of Communications prevented that from happening. What would you have done if you had been on the board at that time to stand up to the Minister and ensure that the Public Protector's report's recommendation was implemented?
I would have studied the report, and I would have then asked if the board wanted to take remedial action on the report, and if not, we implement the report. And if in the event that other board members around me were not in favor of implementing the report as it stood and not wanting also to take remedial action over the report's findings, I would have then expressed a dissenting voice, which is within the parameters of the Companies Act.
Thanks.
Let's say for a moment you were a board member at the time of the SABC 8.
Okay.
How would you have handled that situation?
I think the SABC handled that poorly because first and foremost, these are members of its staff. It's a PR nightmare. I believe the SABC should not be in the news. It should be a provider of the news. That's the first thing that is quite important. I think that was handled poorly. And I would go a little bit further that the SABC 8 were left with no choice but to do the things that they did. And in a way, it made the relationship, both sides look irreparable, which was unfortunate. But the CEO, the board, and the COO, the board should have intervened on that matter. It should have pulled up its delegated authority on that matter, especially the chair, who was the leader of the board. I expected that person to not allow the situation to deteriorate in the manner that it did. And the fact that it did that, at the end of the day, they are responsible.
Yeah, I was utilizing your minute, Honorable Davis. You left a minute, so I used it. Honorable Machoba, on this matter? Nothing. Honorable Tolashe?
Much. If Mr. Gumbi can speak on the issue of the digital migration and the post-digital migration.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I believe the digital migration is delayed and there are commitments to get it back on track. And the commitments have been made. I think one needs to focus on what, to migrate from analog to digital. And I think the SABC can play a leading role in that, especially the board. It could be one of the key areas that the board sees to it that through the ministry, those things are done. And the opportunities that come with the digital migration are a good business model addition or enhancers for the SABC itself in terms of spectrum, in terms of how it can continue to compete in the innovative and digital sector that it now finds itself.
Again, let me utilize this minute. In which areas has Parliament failed in executing or exercising its oversight on SABC?
Yeah,
and how would you have handled the matter if you were in their position?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. First and foremost, I express that sentiment. I think Parliament should not be like government. It should be swift. It should be composed of people that know what they're looking for. When any of the parastatals are finding or find themselves in distress, it should not take Parliament a long time to call those who are responsible for that to account. That's number one. The SABC did not collapse, or should I say did not find itself in trouble last year, December, when the ad hoc committee was doing its work. It's been an eyesore over time. And we've been hearing stories that people are coming and they're not reporting, or when they do report, it's not sufficient enough. So the robustness of Parliament was not sufficient, so it was lacking. So Parliament needs to also look at itself from that regard. Number two, I think Parliament also, when it is faced with things that are beyond its scope, which it would happen from time to time, one can understand these things, I think it needs to have strong technical support that it can source from market so that it can go into the issues as they happen at that time, so that the early warning signs can be utilized so that these parastatals do not draw below a certain level.
Lastly, what is the challenge with SABC acquiring rights to broadcast sport? And if you were a board member, how would you address this challenge? Because we think a broadcasting sport is a very important one.
I think the SABC needs to get its hands on most of the content that matters to its mandate. Sport is one of those contents that the SABC needs to broadcast because of its reach and also because of revenue that you derive from showcasing those sporting pieces, and then you get advertisers. The only thing that I would caution about, from what I've heard, just from the media, so to speak, is that the negotiations that go into acquiring those rights, I think that's where the light needs to be shined on more. First of all, you need people who know how to negotiate, and there are people that should negotiate for the SABC, not selling the SABC in the negotiations with third parties. I think that is the crucial part, because you have an organization that no one defends, but everyone takes from it. I think that is important. And lastly, the SABC must always create long-term content guarantees. For instance, if you are working with sport, for instance, you can have a 3-year plan, a 4-year plan, where you buy the rights and you can negotiate better. And in the negotiation of those content and the rights for sport, you can then start seeing what the other parties that sell you the content, what else that you can leverage from them. And you find that over time, there are other levers that you can use to actually bring the price down and trade off on other areas.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Honorable Dolashe, for your minutes. Honorable Kalako.
Thank you, Chair. So for me, it's just to, I've heard you have mentioned some of the acts and some of the internal documents and policy documents that govern the SABC. Amongst them, especially because that was a heated discussion even during the time of the inquiry, between Broadcasting Act, Companies Act, and Companies Act, including that memorandum of incorporation, which one takes precedence? How do you solve that problem which was there?
Sure. Thank you, Honourable Member. I come from the space of business and commerce, and I've had the privilege of also serving on the IOD 10 years ago. So governance is important, and I understand it. For me, the Companies Act comes first because it is the guideline. This is an organization. And then the specific acts that relate to broadcasting then are industry specific. You need to use those. Where the acts are in conflict, then you can take an opinion and see which one takes precedent over the other, or take a legal opinion on the issue. But in most instances, the Companies Act guides the conduct of directors, guides the conduct at which those who are office bearers must handle themselves in going forward.
What is your position on upward referral as outlined in the SABC editorial policy?
I remember reading that. I've forgotten it. I'm sorry.
Just
I've just gone blank.
Your opinion, your position on that.
I'm sorry.
Whilst you are still there, are you familiar with one of the important documents there, which also guides operation, functions, powers between shareholder and the board and the executive? The delegation of authority framework, what is entailed?
There's the shareholders' compact that gets signed, I think, between minister and the board, and then the delegation of authority. Right now, all the things that govern the SABC as they stand they seem inadequate considering what has happened. Now, there are two possibilities without trying to, by trying to avoid over-legislation. I would use the word behavioral as opposed to legislation. Let's assume that legislation is enough, but the behavior of the people that are placed in the positions of power and influence to execute on these things, I think they've absconded in their duties. I think that is where the main problem is. The documentation and the authorities and the delegations and the acts, whilst at some instances there are conflicts, the conflicts are not such that the organization can find itself in the place that it does. I think it's a people issue. And when I say it's a people issue, I mean a people issue at the SABC. I think it's a people issue at the Ministry. I think it's a people issue even to those political parties that have influence in the SABC.
If you are successful as a member, appointed as a member of the board, what things do you think needs in all this, including we talked about the Broadcasting Amendment Bill, which is before us, but in others, is there something which you think needs, whether you consider memorandum of incorporation, the delegation of authority, editorial policy, the board, the board charter, which, if you look at them, do you think there's a need for strengthening of those?
I would say there is a need, but I wouldn't start there first. I would start at placing the right people in the right positions to do the right thing. And thereafter, there are policy conflicts within the SABC, for instance, where I think those need to be pulled together. You would know that to change policy takes a bit longer. It may even post-date the functions of the board. But you start working with what you have. And with what you have seen that the way and the manner that the Ministry of Communication does sometimes work with the SABC in the recent past can be counterproductive. And I think that needs fixing. And I don't think that's a function of the board. It's far above the pay grade of the board. But there is direction that the board can give in that regard. And I think there are things that need to happen slightly before the board is appointed or above level of the board, at this level and at cabinet level or National Assembly level.
I can donate 2 minutes to you, Honorable Ndoz, my 2 minutes.
Yes, it's good to give the candidate an opportunity to properly make us understand where he stands. You say the Companies Act takes precedence over the Broadcasting Act in your answer to Honorable Kolago's answer. Do you remember that you said so?
Yes, I want to repeat it, please.
No, you don't have to. I mean, I want to ask a new question.
Okay.
So, Minister Faith Mutambi removed the 3 members of the board. You know, you were asked that question earlier, and using the Companies Act. So there was such a debate, and there was an unequivocal agreement that the Broadcasting Act is above the Companies Act. I just want to get a sense, why would the Broadcasting Act, you're obviously wrong that the Companies Act comes above, so the Broadcasting Act comes above, but do you have any idea why the Broadcasting Act has to be above the Companies Act?
Yeah, let me correct what I said. I said I come from business. The Companies Act is the guiding of the governance, but specifically Broadcasting Act is important. Where there's a policy conflict, one needs to take a legal opinion on it to see which one takes precedence.
Do you know why the Broadcasting Act is above the... Yeah, give us that. Be specific.
The Broadcasting Act is the one that regulates the SABC. It's sector-specific. It's the one that is governed for the SABC. So that is why that piece of legislation takes precedent. But it does not exclude the Companies Act in some of the key elements that it has and that are good.
It's still a vague answer. You're not redeeming yourself. Final question. What was wrong with the multi-choice deal?
Just recap the deal.
The multi-choice deal, SABC. Do you know anything about it?
I just heard the noise, but just recap the essence of it.
Which noise?
About that, there was a deal with multi-choice where the multi-choice paid less than what they were supposed to pay. What is the exact nature of the multi-choice deal? Please clarify for me.
No, I don't answer questions.
Okay. Okay.
You're the one who wants to be in the board, not me.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're done, members. If Mr. Gumbi, you have any question to us, you are free to do so, sir. You are free to do
okay.
so.
In fact,
if you don't have,
I don't have.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Members, please, Temengos, you are creating chaos here. Honorable Davis, we're still working. The meeting is still on. Otherwise, you won't get my minutes if you are not sitting down. That's a, no, I'm still addressing the candidate. Mr. Gumbi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are happy that you spend time to make your contribution. All we can say is to say thank you very much and go well. Why are you? Akanambuzu, yes. Can we get the next candidate?
Comfort break. Comfort break.
That's the last candidate. You won't get my 2 minutes. Yeah. Oh, no, it's okay. You can go. It's Michael Bauer. Only one now. And then we're done. Okay. You get. I hope you are done, Mr. Ngoma. Thank you very much, sir. Welcome to the interview. This is the panel of committee members, not community, committee members, Portfolio Committee on Communication. Please just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and the reasons why you think we must appoint you as a board member of SABC. That will be done, that you will do in 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. Good evening. My name is Michael Bauer. I'm 39 years old. I live in Cape Town. I'm married with 2 children. My day job is I'm the managing director of a property company. Why you should appoint me, or why should you consider me? Well, I'm very good at what I do. I'm also a taxpayer, which you will understand. There's obviously certain reasons why I think I can contribute here. What else could I say? I think
That's fine.
Sums it up.
Just tell us a bit on your work experience. Where?
Yeah.
Yes. Who are you? Where did you work, and all of that?
Sorry. As I said, I have 14 years experience, executive experience as a managing director of a national property company. I also serve on 6 boards as non-executive director. That's mainly on non-profit organizations. So the longest serving position I have there is for about 10 years already, and the others are between 5 and 4 years.
Thank you very much, Honorable Davis. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to need some guidance from the Secretariat on this question. I don't think it's a question necessarily to Mr. Bauer, but thank you very much for being here. On your CV, it says that you are a non-South African citizen and that you are a permanent resident.
That is correct.
Chairperson, according to the Broadcasting Act, it says that any person will not qualify to be appointed to the board if such a person is not a citizen of and not permanently resident in the Republic. So my reading of the Act says that you need to be a citizen who lives here permanently. So I'm not sure if the vetting process was undertaken thoroughly in this case, because Mr. Bauer does not seem to be a citizen of South Africa.
Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I can. That was disclosed on my CV, where it quite clearly said I'm a German citizen. I have permanent residency, and I quoted my ID number on it.
Under disqualification, a person... I've heard that before. Under disqualification, a person will not qualify to be appointed to the board if such a person is not a citizen of and not permanently resident in the Republic. That's A of 16. If the person is not a citizen of and not permanently resident in the Republic. Interpret this clause. Are you a citizen?
No, I'm not. I'm permanent resident.
There you are, members. Do you want to proceed, Honorable Davis? Because you asked a question.
Chair, I just think we need some guidance from the Secretariat as to what to do in this case, because obviously the process has been conducted and the vetting has been done by the Secretariat. So I think we should get their advice on whether or not to proceed.
You wanted to say something, Honorable Van Dam? I'm coming.
See, because Mr. Bauer is here, can we just interview him and then let the Secretariat seek legal opinion if they must? But Mr. Bauer is here, and I think let's interview him.
Okay, Honorable Tsedi.
Honorable Chair, I think we have invited Mr. Bauer to the interviews. I think I concur with the view which says let's proceed with the interviews, because already here I'm trying to interpret it in the light of what the CV says, South African permanent residents with the ID. So obviously we'll need legal opinion on this particular matter, but that does not stop us from proceeding with the interviews as the candidate is here. We have invited him already.
Honorable Tolasha.
Chair, my difficulty is the definition of who must be interviewed. I understand the availability and everything else, but you start to identify correctly who should be interviewed. Let's resolve that matter and don't bring in the matter of him being here, because he might be here, but if he's not the right person, he must not be interviewed, because we'll be creating an expectation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's why we must discuss this matter. Honorable Ndlozi?
Chairperson, there's no matter to discuss. The law is clear. He's a permanent resident, and therefore he's here. We can't delete, there's no legal opinion needed on that. There's no other thing. He is a permanent resident. Then we proceed, do our thing. We'll decide on our own after he has left on the basis of but we can't say, let's stop here and get an opinion on the definition of a permanent resident. A legal opinion, it's wrong.
No,
He's a permanent resident, he meets the requirement in that relation, let's check everything else. But on those bases alone, I would say let's proceed and stop this thing of saying legal opinion or what. I'm persuading members. The candidate is a permanent resident. Let's proceed.
Honorable Kungubela?
Whatever the committee decides, I will respect. But I want to put this point. On legalities, once there's an inquiry in mind, that inquiry needs to be dealt with. Because I align myself with Sister that there's a difference. There are two things here. He is interviewable tomorrow once the matter is clarified. Once the matter is clarified, he is interviewable. In other words, you are able to hit, Chair, you are able to hit here two birds with one stone just by being cautious. Being cautious means you don't interview him to create expectation you might find you are not going to meet. But if it is clarified, tomorrow then you interview him, then he's got the opportunity. But if you interview him today, you would have actually created solid ground for those expectations. I respect the committee. I think it's important for me to express.
You are part of this committee, of this panel, so you are putting across your views. Honorable Kalako? So there is a matter to discuss.
Chair, there is a matter to discuss. Honorable Ndlozi is wrong to say there's no matter. No, Chair, I was saying because the act there does not, it says you must be, can you read again then?
Yes, it's important.
It's important. Citizen of.
Be appointed to the board if such a person is not a citizen of and not permanently resident in the Republic. Image, Honorable Kalako?
Yeah, Chair, that's where I'm saying that's where we need assistance. Because he is not a citizen, he is a permanent resident. So it needs, because I don't want us, in South Africa we take things easy.